So my name is Walter Martin Cummins, and I'm named after my mom's father. And I'm starting this way on purpose because I want to go back in time. And before we do that, I want to introduce to the crowd at AREDAY here two very significant gentlemen in the American scene. And Dr. Durley spent a lot of his time when he was a young man marching for civil rights with Dr. Martin Luther King, and has a tremendous deep history within the civil rights movement, and Hawk Newsom has been leading the Black Lives Matter Greater New York City area movement for a number of years. I'd like to maybe have both of you gentlemen talk a little bit about the beginnings of that. But I also wanted to go back to the fact that my mother, who's sitting here, also marched with Dr. King. And when I was a little boy,
She's too young to have marched with us.
Want me to say it for Mom? You're so kind. But that when I was a little boy, I would come home from school and I'd see a new Freedom 63 banner hanging up on the wall of my house. And so learning about civil rights through that lens was quite an education. Dr. Durley, can you talk a little bit about the significance of the civil rights movement then and the climate movement now? And maybe, Hawk, you can chime in a little bit with how you see that regarding your work with Black Lives Matter.
First of all, Chip and Sally, let me thank you and the AREDAY participants, because all too often there are so many retreats going on all over the world where people of significance with so many expertise come together, and they don't realize the real changes in America were caused through the civil and human rights, the women's movement and other movements, and even the climate change movement will take on some of the implications. And you and I know, because we've talked about it, I had no idea I would be involved in the climate change movement. But none of us really do, because there are moments in our lives where things intervene and change us. You saw the significance of the signs that your mother had on the wall. When I left Denver, Colorado in 1959 to go down to Nashville, Tennessee to play basketball, that was my goal in life, to be a basketball player. But God always has something different in your life when you're different. And when I got there and leaving Denver, Colorado on a bus, and the man told me, get behind the white line. White folks ride in the front of the bus. And when I got to the Greyhound bus station, they told me to drink out of the colored water fountain. And here I was, the double defensive, delectable, darling, dynamic, dangerous D from Denver, playing basketball. And I got there, and one insult after another, and I wondered why. What was the difference? And it came down to the color. And at 18 years old, 5 men came into the room and changed my life. Hosea Williams, Julian Bond, Andy Young, John Lewis, and some insignificant guy, Martin Luther King. My freshman year in college. And at that time, I began to talk about civil rights and human rights and constitutional rights. And over the years, it's gone through a lot of different manifestations. And then about 9 years ago, I met a young lady who began to talk about climate change and polar bears and tree huggers, and I thought she was a little off.
She was.
And all of these people, because they had enough time, because they had enough money to walk around and look at bees that were still fluffing and arguing. They had come from privileged backgrounds. But she began to talk, and she introduced me to her husband. And her husband said, I just need to share with you. Her name was Jane Fonda. His name was Ted Turner. And I began to understand that this movement that was going on, there were a lot of very intelligent, well-meaning, knowledgeable people. So I went out to, several years ago, fast forward, to New Mexico to talk to a room full of 200 philanthropic people who were sponsoring this. And they asked me at the end of the program, I hadn't said anything for 3 days, what would I say to this august body who had talked about fracking, who had talked about CO2 and all of these things. And they said, please say something. I said, no, I have nothing to say. They said, please. And I said, okay, since this is the end of it, let me say this. I've listened, I'm impressed, but you're the dullest people I've ever met. You're dull, you don't excite me, you don't excite the masses, you talk to each other, you sing to yourselves, and I would never come back here again. The ocean people talk to the ocean people. The air people talk to the air people. Moms for clean air. The water people talked, and I said, what is this? This is a menagerie. But then I began to understand that the same kind of challenges we face in the civil rights movement, when we were talking about the right to vote, when we were talking about the right to, the constitutional rights, the right to ride anywhere on the bus, and I began to see the analogy between what we were doing in the movement, that we understood the concept of sacrifice and risk. And there were always people that had different varying opinions. And so consequently, I began to make the contrast between civil rights and climate change, global warming, and environmental justice. And I start to see the people that were sitting in the rooms then and the people that are sitting in the rooms now have that same passion. It might be expressed a little bit differently. And I begin to see, because everybody deserves the right to clean air, toxic-free water, right to have that. That's a right. So that's a civil right. That's a human right. Everybody needs to know, everybody needs to see, is this a GMO? We need to see that. Everybody has the right to say that you just can't go up and break a treaty with Paris and Germany. Those are constitutional rights, and that's what we fought for. And the two words that kept us alive were two words, and I think that the movement has to be injected in the climate change movement. One, what are you willing to sacrifice? And what are you willing to risk?
Right on.
If my mother got in the way, I would walk over her.
Right on.
Because that's how important. And it did not, listen how it began to impact the women's movement and other movements, because we had to have, and any great movement is always predicated upon a belief system. And a belief system starts with your thoughts, and your thoughts become your words, and your words become your behavior, and your behavior becomes your habits, and your habits become your destiny. So if the destiny of the climate change movement is to have, it's got to start with our thoughts from an inclusionary part. I got so sick and tired at the early stages of going to conferences where so many people who were very passionate were talking about the disenfranchisement of minorities, of people living in rural areas, and no minorities were there.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
But I found it wasn't that they were discriminating or cutting out, but minorities and many people in the urban areas and many people, there are priorities ahead of climate change.
Amen.
We see it as something far in the future, even though it is at a critical nexus point right now. So consequently, when somebody says, cut off your water, insulate your house, go with solar panels, all of those things are costly. And my job then is to, how do you get your child out of school? How do you present the police brutality? And so that was our concern and even now. And that's why I'm so pleased tonight. And you know, I wasn't scheduled to do this, to meet Hawk Newsom, because this is the younger generation who sees things, and to understand that now, see, young people are not coming to our churches and our mosques and our synagogues because we're wasting a lot of time running our mouths and not letting the moral interpretude do it. So these young people like this are saying, make it real. Let's do something. And everybody here has an obligation to, as I said earlier, to listen, to learn, and to leave. Not just to listen and to learn. And so consequently, I'm so excited when I see those in Black Lives Matter. They can't march like I did. They can't go to jail like I did. I went to jail 27 times. But what they do, what they do is so imperative because of the purity and the transparency, but more importantly, they've got social media.
It is a new time.
It's a new time. So what we did and why we did it, it's the message for civil and human rights. It's the same motive that you have in this room, but you only do what you pick up this information, and how do I take that and ingest it, and then give it back out. A movement only moves with the people that believe in the effort. It's not about articulating. It's nothing worse than somebody who knows he's boxes in training all of his life and never gets in the ring.
Amen.
We're in the ring now. Now, we all might have come over on different ships, but we're in the same boat now.
Amen.
Yes, sir. So, thank you, Reverend Durley. And now, Mr. Newsom, I want to just preface your remarks by saying that you were kind enough to invite me to come meet you a couple of weeks ago when you had come back from Australia or New Zealand, and you were in a barber shop in Harlem. And it turned out that barber shop was underneath the Shabazz Mosque that Malcolm X had, the first one that he had become involved with. And so there's a history. A history is here with us tonight.
Amen.
And I feel the spirit of Malcolm X, and I feel the spirit of Martin Luther King in this room. And I'd like you to comment about how that is for you working within the Black Lives Matter movement in New York, and tell us about how the people are there, and especially how it connects to what Dr. Durley just said.
Right on. I'd like to thank you, Chip, for inviting me here. I'd like to thank all of you who fall under the sound of our voices for being here and being present in the moment. And most importantly, I'm just thankful. Just talking to the good Reverend Doctor made this whole trip for me. And the only thing that I regret is having to follow up his speech. So I just want to dive right in, right? People think that Black Lives Matter only sees things through one lens, and that's police brutality. And that couldn't be any further from the truth. We're on a mission to end oppression and end racism. And when you're talking about racism, you must look at systemic racism. What does that look like? That looks like mass incarceration. That looks like food injustice. That looks like police brutality. And that also looks like environmental crimes against poor people. I mean, I had an epiphany when I was sitting up on the stage, like, wow, we are engaged in the environmental justice fight. We sent hundreds of thousands of dollars down to Flint, Michigan, supplies down to Flint, Michigan. So yes, I guess we are, in fact, already on the ground running. And this fight to liberate Black people includes, the kids who are being poisoned by lead across the country. Black children are 2 times more likely to be poisoned by lead than white children. You look at Cancer Alley in Louisiana, what is it, like 200 petroleum plants down there. The majority of the inhabitants are Black. And if you want to really get to the bottom of this and why this room isn't full of Black people, you have to look in the mirror and say, how much have we invested in Black communities? How much of these resources we have taken how much of these resources we have taken to raise awareness in Black community? We're talking about higher rates of asthma. We're talking about our people being poisoned. And who's gonna do something about it? What you're talking about is action. Yes, action. People in this room know how to make a difference. You throw money at the problem. When you want legislation passed, you pay a lobbyist. You support the congressman or the candidate that you want to get elected. However, we know how to heal every problem. But when it comes to Blacks, we sit back and say, let them figure it out on their own. Or maybe they'll catch up to the fight. Well, money is an amplifier. And if you want to get black people involved in this climate justice, in this climate change fight, then you need to invest in those communities. I'm not here to sugarcoat anything. I'm here to raise awareness. And the good Reverend said I won't catch up to him, but I probably won't. I only got 3 protest-related arrests under my but the
Shows you got good sense.
yeah, they're trying to beat it out of me. But the fact of the matter is we have targets on our backs. And people ask what we need. We need friends. You want us involved in this fight, then be a friend to us. When you see this plant that's gonna poison our communities going up, then you stand out there with us and say, this won't go here. Because I know for damn sure you'll stand up in your own communities and stop these things from happening in your own communities. So if you want people to be involved, then meet them halfway. We are under the gun, literally. An unarmed 17-year-old was shot in his back and murdered last night in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, okay? We are dying, and you want us to take a break and look at the earth? Well, guess what? Life in America is good for a lot of people in this room, and we haven't experienced that privilege, right? You want us to help you, how about you give us some help? How about you stand up and get arrested with us? You take some of those hits with us. We need allies. You want allies? We need allies. We're talking about 5 centuries. 5 centuries of oppression. And in this country, Michael Vick's dogs got more justice than black people killed by the police.
Well, you know, the truth is hard, and one of the things that we do here at AREDAY is that we talk about the truth. Now, we've been talking about it through the lens of climate, and we've been talking about it through the fact that we've put up so much greenhouse gases that we're literally breaking down the life support systems of the planet Earth for everybody. But Hawk, what I hear you saying is that the life support systems for the black people have been under the gun for 500 years in this country. And Dr. Durley, what I heard you say is that when you were Hawk's age, or quite a bit younger, you were marching for essentially the same reasons. It was a different time. We didn't know about climate back then. Maybe police brutality took a different coat.
It wasn't police, it was Ku Klux Klan then.
Okay.
Blue Klux Klan.
Blue Klux Klan. So the lynchings, the results were pretty much the same. The condition of one mind psychologically that you're less than, and privilege that you're more than. And when the two can come together, and I love what he was saying, it's one thing to look at the financial commitment, it's another thing to look at the heart, the mind, the body commitment. I've seen many things try to change by throwing the money at it, but if the people are not there and the wills are not there, this is why the business community is so important, because they will control politicians. I mean, what they're doing now, talking about drilling of the oil in the ocean, relaxing, I think it needs a lot of people to get rid of Scott Pruitt. And so consequently, but people say, wait a minute, we don't want to do that. It might, and even in the clergy community, when you look at many of the large bodies, and they talk a good game, they're on their knees, they're praying to God, but when it comes out, if the people in their congregation are saying, wait a minute, we control Duke power, we control Georgia power, we're over this, they'll say, well, then it might hurt their tithe a little bit. So they will back off. And how can you support somebody that in that? So from an overall congregate point of view, if we're talking about love, if we're talking about forgiveness, if we're talking about allowing those things to move us, then the congregates have to put the pressure on the clergy. The clergy has to put it on the business people, and the business people will put it on the politicians, because the scientists are giving us good, solid information. And there is no disrespect between the faith community and the science. We appreciate science, and I'm sure that, and most scientists, when they get in the crunch, they have to call on some God. So there is no disconnect. So when we combine the faith element, so I'm convinced now, business, Politics, education, they must be set up on a moral foundation. We're in a moral battle right now down on the border. But the politics are trying to control that. But the morality of families being pulled apart will win. And we will win in the climate movement when we take moral positions and moral stability and do not put profits over people.
Amen.
Well, thank you, sir. So, Hawk, how can we, obviously, we live in a very privileged community here in Aspen, Colorado, and we are gathered here today to tackle this issue of how can we help end racism in America?
Oh, wow. In all honesty, don't confuse my passion with anger, right? It's very easy at
Doesn't show that way, my friend, at all.
Thank you,
You
brother.
don't show any anger at all. Never saw it either one of you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you. So it's love. And it's love, like the Reverend was saying, that would make you, the reason why I'm in this battle, like, you know, this mission, I'm on this mission. My parents met at a civil rights rally. I was born on April 4th, the day that Dr. King was assassinated a few years earlier, the day that Maya Angelou was born. I was born on a very historic day for Black people, and I feel like I was put on this earth for this particular purpose, and that's why I was given this deep sense of empathy. I'm able to put myself in the shoes of people who suffer injustice, and this is what you have to be able to do. You have to say, you know what, my children won't face these unfair admission practices in schools. I don't have to worry about my kid being shot going to the store for Skittles or Arizona iced tea. That's not my reality. But you know what? It is for millions of America, and I'm here today to stop it. We talk about the current administration, and a lot of us see it as a curse, but you must look at it as a gift, because now our people are woke, people are out in the streets, people are taking action, but action is the key. You have to stand up and inform your communities. When we put out a call, you have to show up. You have to be present in those communities. What we need to do is educate people. Educate people. We have a program called Rejuvenation, right? And some of the people who work with it, like Chris Alata, work on it, are here today. And what we're doing is we're going and promoting mindfulness and wellness in communities, in impoverished communities. And we're teaching people how to eat properly, and we're giving them food to eat. Healthy food, plant-based food, so when their money runs out at the end of the week, instead of running and buying dollar menu food or Chinese food that is full of just toxicity, right? They'll have healthy food to eat. So why can't we put this climate change fight right in the middle of rejuvenation? And the concept of rejuvenation, it's rejuvenation. We're breathing life back into a lifeless people. My people have been beaten down for so long, and I'm going into our communities with love, and you need to come in with me.
And we will, too, and we
I
will.
want to follow, because when you really go down to the etiological factors that influence the psychological impending, what causes a lot of this is a four-letter word, which is called fear. Fear of the unknown. We don't fear what we know. If someone says, I'm afraid of the dark, and you put them in a nice, comfortable room, there's no fear. But among those who are in certain levels, there is a fear. And the fear is because we're not doing what we call communication. It is broken down. When we had the civil rights, when in 1963 at the march, we had Jews, we had Muslims, we had Shiites, we had women, we had all. But fear brings a certain level of knowledge. And fear eradicates ignorance. Right now, we're moving in an ignorant plane, and we're moving further apart. I never thought we'd be back here after 58 years. I thank God for many of the young people that are going beyond our thinking. But fear will breed ignorance, and ignorance will breed a certain kind of, I've got to defend my turf, and I'll stop you from impeding on me. So what this does is to alleviate that fear. And people have to stop and say, I've often said racism will end when white people want it to. Because I've always said we've got to work together. 60 years of this, and there would always another little twist here, but as they say, we will stand for this. This is what we're not. That's not everybody, I'm saying, but in overall, as you talked, it's a systemic kind of effort. When you start with the educational level, when you start with the employment level, when you start with the psychological, but if we join forces and say, as you was talking about, join forces, that's when we begin to alleviate the fear. I remember one time, a man in 1960 came up to me and said, "Look at you, nigga. You ain't never gonna vote in this country. This is our country. Why don't you go back to Africa?" And I said, "I've never been to Africa."
We kind of built this country here.
Yeah, we built the White House.
Yeah.
It should have been called the Black House. But that fear and that ignorance, but I had to rise above that and understand that this is not it. And all the articulation, at one time I just stopped doing this. I said, what, is this entertainment? No, this is about a conviction of the Spirit fueled by a God that's larger than any of us, that will hold us in the palm of his hand. And when all else fails, when people turn against you, when everything is coming against you, just say, I'm in the wrong lane, but I'm in the right cause.
Amen. Amen.
Well, I've heard two words that resonate. You've talked about empathy and you talked about education, and maybe those are the two words that can best address that four-letter word called fear. And if we can find it in our hearts that the empathy that Hawk has expressed about how he's reacting to the Black Lives Matter movement. Now when I brought up Black Lives Matter and I said, when I met Hawk Newsom and I started talking about Black Lives Matter, some of my friends said, oh, militants. And I went, wait a minute, militants? I didn't say the Black Panther Party. I said, this is Black Lives Matter. And so then Reverend Durley, I called him up, we had a long chat one day, and he said, well, I was in Ferguson.
I was in Ferguson.
Right on.
And remember how much that was in the news not too long ago. We don't hear anything about that anymore, do we?
No, but see, when we challenged Martin Luther King and Andy and all of them, and we came up with SNCC, we were the Black Lives Matter then. We were the Black Lives Matter. We were SNCC. And then the Black nationalists challenged us. And we were against, so every society, they has another group that comes along. So when we can partner with them and share our wisdom, they can run on. You've never seen a general on the front line. Those are for those that have the strength, the intelligence, how to use social media. My grandson has to teach me how to use the phone. But people like this, so we have to use that wisdom to encourage them rather than be fearful. But when people hear Black Lives Matter, that militancy that comes out, that's because of ignorance. Mm-hmm. But when you see and you hear, then you say, wow, and he makes sense.
It's interesting, right? If we were militant, judging by the way that we are incarcerated by the masses, that we are deprived, and the government has failed to protect us, if we were militant, we would take to arms and take to the street, and this country would be lit on fire. Thank God that Black Lives Matter is not militant. Thank God that we're moving from a place of love that's really trying to liberate Black people and create a better society. When Blacks do well, the country wins. You never know. If you eliminate some of these circumstances, the cure to cancer, the cure to AIDS, and some of these issues that we face could be in the underdeveloped mind of some kid sitting in the projects in the Bronx, or some kid running around with a red bandana on in Chicago. Like, be thankful we're not militant. Be thankful that we are assertive. And just on another note, anytime a Black person stands up and is unapologetic in America, people feel threatened, and we are called militant. When they marched with Dr. King was a communist. He had the FBI, the CIA, and every other acronym you could imagine, right? After him. It's a price you pay when you challenge the status quo, and we put our lives on the line, and we do it to lead so that others can join in.
Dr. King said, we'll live together as brothers and sisters or die together as fools.
Amen.
And that's what this is about. Coming together as one
Well,
one nation, one people, and one cause.
exactly, and the only way to peace is through nonviolence. And there's only one way that we're going to solve the climate crisis, and that is through peace.
Amen.
And so, in our final few minutes, perhaps we could talk about how you see the future in terms of bringing the wisdom of the past into the present and looking down the road at the solutions that we learned in the civil rights movement, through the Black Lives Matter movement, and now this climate movement, which actually every member of the human race is in, even whether they know it or not.
I believe that right now, there's a movement going on across this country and across the world where folks are heart-centered and they are leading with their hearts. What we must do is make the world, make America, let's start here, right? Make America a place where racism is not tolerated, where we won't hear of it, where we won't speak of it, where crimes against our environment are not tolerated. You have to create, what they did successfully was create this tsunami of change. And they did that through love. We have to do the same thing now. Everything happens in circles, and I'm so glad that we have this wealth of knowledge that we could pull from so we could figure out how to do this thing the right way.
I gave up on in 1968. I didn't think that we were doing what we should have done. I joined the Black Panther Party in Chicago. While I was in the Black Panther Party in Chicago, in Illinois, we had feeding programs for children. We had early morning breakfast programs. And I was coming out the West Coast, out of Oakland with Huey and all of them. And we had feeding programs. We had mentoring programs. And every time we were labeled, they were cursing me out and others. And I was earning a master's degree at Illinois in psychology as a Black Panther. They never showed that on TV.
Yes.
Those that were with us, we would articulate those kinds of things. Che Guevara was a great, intelligent person, but when we lock people in out of fear and stereotype them, we can never get beyond that. And the only people that can break that, even coming into the climate movement, are those in this room. It's nothing to have a great conference and we come and we learn. He's been teaching me about, what was that thing you've been teaching me about?
Blockchain.
Blockchains. And
Blockchains.
and all of this money was floating around, and I'm still using a $5 bill. He's like, antiquated. But we're, once again, in the Black community, we're the taillights and not the headlights.
Amen.
So we've got to take this and teach to bring people of awareness so it comes into the innermost part of your being and allow that to be fueled. And then, like we used to sing a song, ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. We're gonna keep on marching. We're gonna keep on preaching. We're gonna keep on stepping. That's why I say those that leave this room must sit up, must stand up, must speak up, because that will make the difference. And as you said, when we join forces, there is no force greater, and it's fueled by love.
Amen.
It's fueled by respect.
Amen.
It's fueled by dignity. It's fueled by, if I hurt, you hurt. My child goes through just as much as you. And when I can accept that responsibility, and it's been so good that now when we can do this and share this, that it does not come back void. When you speak truth to power, it will come back. When we challenge Georgia Power, Duke Power, into those, or the nuclear plants, it's not for us. America, as you said, Dr. King used to say this, because of what the Black people have gone through, we are the consciousness of America. The consciousness, I mean, it's just what we're seeing, children in cages, that's just unheard of. Yet I saw a man drive with a big cowboy hat in Texas, say, keep them locked up. They challenged my cattle. I heard that on TV tonight. Keep them locked up. And so the guy said, but those are infants, those are children. How do they challenge your cattle? He said, they'll grow up. If we can stop it now, that's a fear. He's not a bad person.
Yeah.
He's not a bad person. He doesn't. And if we, and those in this room, we can join and share that word, and share that word. When they called us Black Panthers, not the movie, but the actual Panthers, we were not about that. We were not about that. And even now, sometimes I'll go into places and those stereotypes will come. That's Black Lives Matter. That's a Me Too woman, therefore she must hate all men. Stupid.
Yeah.
No, they have certain rights, inalienable rights.
I just want to jump in right there. Just take this with you. You see us marching in the streets. You see us standing up for civil rights. I have a law degree, okay? There are several members of my board who hold Ivy League degrees. There's an individual who holds 3 master's degrees.
Yeah.
We are opening schools in the Bronx next year, okay? Storefront schools that house only 20 students so the community can walk by and see our children learning. That food program that he's talking about, we're taking from their lead and implementing these things. Don't let the media tell you who Black Lives Matter is. Do your research, do your homework, find out the truth.
And you look at I'm a licensed psychologist from University of Massachusetts, 4 degrees and all that, but I learned greatest lessons when I was with people of consciousness concern, where they had a heart message. And if we can teach, my grandson just finished the Naval Academy last week, but I had to tell him, but I had to condition him before we went in there to let him know that he's going into a new environment where these kids are admirals and all this. So don't go in there. And the number one English word I want you to understand, grandson, my daughter's son, is relationships. Relationships. Not the great, all these other things. Establish relationships with people that are different than you. And don't try to impress them, but let them impress you.
Amen.
And then you can be comfortable in your own skin. The tradition says, and here it starts with Chip, humility. There's in the old Christian text, humble yourself before the almighty hand of God so that God might exalt you in due time, casting on him your every care because he cares. Let us not exalt ourselves, but let a force bigger than us exalt us. Then I can reach over and talk with the young. I can reach over and talk with the scientist. I can reach over and talk with the business person because I'm not putting them down. My mother used to say this, down not those who are down, cheer them up in their sorrow. For this old world is a funny old world, and you may be down tomorrow. So
Amen.
Constantly look for somebody you can lift up. Let us lift up together.
Well, so let us take the lessons and the wisdom of the civil rights movement, bring it through the Black Lives movement, into the climate movement, and let us take the fear of America and turn it into the love of America.
Right on.
We have run out of time, but I want to give the last word to these 2 gentlemen, and maybe we could start with you, Hawk. Do you have any closing remarks?
First, I'd like for all of you to know that Chip marched with Black Lives Matter Greater New York on the steps of City Hall about a month ago. He was out there with us. Why? Because the mayor, 1 out of 4 people killed by the police are mentally ill. Our mayor in New York implemented training for officers in 2015. To date, only 13% have been trained, and people are losing their lives. The vulnerable in our community are losing their lives, and Chip stood with us on that front, so can we clap it up for him?
Take after my mom.
Right on.
Give her the credit. Fruit don't fall far from the tree.
That's it. That's it. And I just want to leave you with a small piece of a chant from Assata Shakur. She said, "It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and respect one another. We have nothing to lose but our chains."
Beautiful, beautiful.
I don't know who said it, but somebody out here knows. Somebody said we have nothing to fear but what? Fear itself. We looked at the enemy and we saw that the enemy was us. That was Pogo. And so we come to a point now in a beautiful, beautiful setting. Each of you have been blessed to be here. Each of you have been called to this moment. And as I started on the first day, defining 2 words in the Greek, the first word was chronos. It meant that there are 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds, and chronologically. And Bartley, you've taught me what chronos means. This red button has been going off on everything. every minute. I am so shocked to see that it went off 8 seconds ago and you still let us stay up here. But Chronos. And we get so caught up in our Chronos moments, in our strict plans, that we forget Kairos. K-A-I-R-O-S. It means that it is divinely inspired by something greater than us. And if you can leave here tonight, after all the information, and stop and meditate and understand that in a Kairos moment, I'm being directed by something greater than me, and not allow the Chronos to dictate and miss the blessing that's already yours. Leave this place with an understanding that this is not an accident. You'll never sit in the same place at the same time with the same three up here, but you've been called for such a time as this. And as Dr. King said, I may not get there with you, but I've already seen the promised land. Ciao.